Hey, I want to welcome our viewers to a really cool podcast. We were talking in the green room. So we have some things that I think if you will grasp it, and because of Neil's ability to simplify the mental pictures in your mind, I think you'll walk away with a better understanding of how you can grow your business. So, Neil, if they haven't listened to your previous podcast, tell our listeners who you are, what you do, and who you serve.
Okay, Pete. Great to be back again, and thank you very much for the invite.
Mhm.
Um, I'm based in Cork, in Ireland. I call myself a recovering accountant. I trained as a cost and pricing accountant, which got me into profitability. Um, but when I discovered 80/20, when I was working as an accountant, I knew then my days as an accountant were numbered because I loved helping people find their profitability and growing it through 80/20 and pricing. So I left the accounting world behind me after 15 years. And I've had my own consulting business now for 20 years. Like I said, in the two main areas I do are I help people identify their profitable whales and their loss-making sardines, and then I help them put a strategy in place to change that mix. So you start taking out sardines and replacing them with whales and super whales, and your profit just starts going up exponentially because you're having a double whammy of taking out a negative and putting in a positive. So it's pretty amazing. I do a lot of work in that area, and I have some case studies to share with you today. And I love 80/20, and I love
Yeah.
discussing it. So
Yeah. I love when we were talking earlier before we came on.
yeah,
You talked about a client and
yeah.
they identified it in the analysis. They recognized their whales. To walk our viewers through that conversation.
Yeah, and interestingly, Pete, it's always going to be a story close to my heart because it's the first time I really came across 80/20. It was my days as an accountant, working for this electronics company, subcontract electronics. They made printed circuit boards for the likes of Apple and Dell and so on.
Mhm.
36 customers. Anyway, I did the analysis and I worked out the net profit or loss per customer for each of the 36 and discovered pretty remarkably that 3 of the 36 were giving the business 91% of net profits. Exactly half them, 18 were losing money. So it's pretty
Wow.
amazing. Three whales in the middle, I suppose we sometimes call them dolphins. They were giving smallish profits, 15 of them, and then 18 were red. They were losing money. But the interesting thing is, of the three whales, one of them was a super whale because they were giving 60% of the net profit.
Mhm.
Not only that, but that business was growing and has since grown into a huge, massive business. It's a multinational, American multinational based here in Cork, and it was kind of early days, but
Mhm.
they were a super whale, and um, uh, I gave this information to the owners, and this is where you've the mindset of the owners comes into the equation
Mhm.
because look, it's perfectly understandable. If you come along, imagine I came along to you, Pete, and did this analysis, and I was telling you that half your customers were losing money. Like it's not a good news story, really, is it? So you'll get a reaction. And typical their reaction is typical to one I've got over the years. Like the most common thing they say, first of all, is, "Oh well, those small sardines can grow into bigger clients."
Yeah, I've heard that a lot.
No, and look, I will accept that
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
But
Go
then
ahead.
how you handle that is like the numbers. My step is the analysis. I'll crunch the numbers. I'll tell you the whales and sardines. But obviously, there's more to the process than just that. So, for example, I would go through that list with the owners, with marketing people, and whatever, and we look at it from different angles. We'll say. So, for example, that very first one, I'll say to them, are there, and those 18 reds, okay? Are there customers in there that you think have the potential to grow? Let's say they're in a good sector, maybe they're a software company, maybe they're in AI, maybe they're in whatever. Are there customers in there that you think have the potential to become a whale? So you go through that, and if there are, you classify them. But from my experience, it's never more than 10% of them, okay? You would never classify more than 10%. So 90% of those sardines will stay sardines. Um, but for example, like some of them they had them as customers for 10, 15 years. And let's say their sales annually were 10, 15 grand. Okay. They're not suddenly going to metamorphosize into this freaking super whale. Well, it's highly unlikely. Okay.
Mhm.
But like, so that's an important exercise. You look at things like the economic trends, what are the growing sectors and so on, technology, environmental factors. If there was companies in there that were very strong in our environmental focus, you might say, so yeah, you go through it. But I suppose the really interesting thing about that case was the one super whale. Now, they were giving this business a massive chunk of profits every single month. And I used to work it out. Once I had the thing set up, it was very easy to refresh it once a month. Okay.
Mhm.
I could see. So I'm just going to pick a number now and say this business, we're giving them 40,000 net profit every month. Okay. And almost 500,000 a year. Now imagine that 40,000 net profit. That's after all your costs are paid, coming into this business every single month. And it was around that figure, I think. Okay. So imagine that coming in. But however, the thing about this business is that the super whale were looking for a higher level of service. Okay. For example, they wanted us to hold stock of certain smaller finished goods in our stock room. Okay. So that they could call it up at short notice. They wanted this. And I could see the company were resisting it. Okay. We were resisting it. Like there wasn't a huge cost to this. They were looking for it. So the way it's like these small little things, the relationship they say about it's like a bank account, is it? You want more deposits than withdrawals.
Right.
And I could see that there was more withdrawals going on here, deposits, as in the relationship with the super whale. But the really frustrating thing from my point of view is, for example, this company had say 6 people in customer service. So what they do is they'd say, well, you each look after 6 customers. Yeah. So they had some of these customer service people looking after sardines when the client wanted more service. So it's like feeding a sardine the same as a whale. They were basically allocating the same resources to the super whale as they were to a sardine, which made no sense. And I could see it. And unfortunately, this tale does not have a happy ending because the super whale walked. We know whales can't walk, but you know what I mean? They left the business.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was catastrophic for them. They brought almost 500,000 in a profit with them. Oh, it was just.
And you were saying like you could see it coming because
Yes.
you understood it. I like you mentioned the word AI earlier.
Yeah.
I heard a person say HI, human intelligence. You can't just look at numbers without looking at what's behind the numbers. And you have to use that common sense kind of thing, because if you're just looking at numbers, you miss the potential to grow, the feeling you get. But what you're saying is, you would talk to them about that super whale, and I think they just couldn't move their mindset to the fact that they have to move their resources away from the sardines and feed the whale. And because they didn't move the resources, the food that they're given overall to the super whale, it walked.
Yes. Yeah, it was very frustrating. And I moved on from that company shortly after that. It was just a coincidence I moved on. But it's like, it's like there's a train coming down the track and you're on it, and it's, if you don't do something, it's going to hit you. And like obviously the owner was obviously an intelligent man. He built this successful business. It wasn't like he wasn't intelligent. He'd survived in business a long time. But I suppose they just found it hard to embrace. I suppose if you to summarize it, Pete, I would say in a nutshell, they were viewing all their customers the same. So they were looking at this sardine as the same as the super whale. In their eyes, that was the way they always did it. And even though I came along with this powerful information, they really didn't take it on board. They didn't take it on board and reallocate the resources as they could have and should have. Okay. They were just kind of I don't know, stuck in this kind of almost like a rut of, well, all customers are important. Oh no, we can take Mary off that sardine because, well, we need to look after them. They're with us 15 years. Oh yeah, they're losing, their sales are 10 grand and it's costing us 15, 18 grand a year to service them. But, you know, we must look after them, even though they're losing us money, you know? Anyway, it's, what can I say?
No, I think, you know, I'm not an accountant, obviously. And, you know, and Jeff, who introduced us, had that same kind of analysis of the 80-20. And I've heard at least a half a dozen stories of owners that got it at the beginning, but they couldn't continue with it because I think it's like, I hear, well, I got to treat all my customers the same. And I said, you treat them all with respect, but you have to feed your company with growth, because what does growth attract? Good talent. So if you're growing and feeding your super whales, you're going to attract more talent to your company. So it's almost like you have, as an owner or the leader of the company, a responsibility to feed them at whales. But I think it's human nature. Sometimes we just get in our mind, we got to treat everybody the same. Yeah. And I think you treat them with respect, but you prioritize the growth of your company by feeding the super whales.
Yeah. Yes. And it's just like you're saying, Pete, it's a real shift in how you view your customers, how you allocate your resources, how you approach them strategically. And I suppose it seems to be some people can take a step, you know, if you think of maybe stepping stones going across a river or something, to really embrace it, you have to take the steps all the way across the river. Now, maybe some people only go like halfway across, or they go a third across and then they stop. So they embrace it a little bit, but it's not fully. So then they don't get the full benefit.
Right.
And, you know, it's interesting, when I was just prepping for, I have a couple of case studies there I can go through in a while if you like. And while I was just prepping them earlier this morning before I went for my round of golf, just finished my golf. I was just doing a little prep and I was thinking about it. And in both case studies, I suppose you'll see that it's whales and sardines. And I suppose what another way of describing 80-20 is, you know, if you think about a lot of business owners, they look at their customers and they look at the sales, yeah? And they'll categorize their customers by sales. So, John or Mary, they're really important because they're our highest customers by sales. And they'll put them into a category, but it's just sales, yeah? Not thinking about how much does it cost to service, how much does it cost, let's just stick with services for the moment, how much does it cost us to provide that service to John and Mary? And what 80-20 does is it brings the costs into the equation, right? So if John and Mary have the same level of sales, but let's say John is a low maintenance customer, let's just call it an accountant, okay, a CPA. If John is a low maintenance customer and we do our annual accounts for him and he rings us twice a year and there's no other queries or whatever, and John is paying us, you know, X, okay, John will probably be a profitable customer. But let's say Mary pays us the same amount every year, but Mary's on the phone like every week. She has a query. We do her payroll. Her staff are coming on, querying their payroll. She's getting letters from the tax man. So she's on to us. Oh, can you sort this out for me? Can you do this? Query about this. How do I claim my expenses? Do. Like, that's like a taxi meter. You know, you get into a taxi, right? The meter runs and runs and runs and runs. So you can imagine, I know it's probably an extreme example, but it does happen. So imagine Mary imagine the cost of all these staff in your office replying to Mary's queries on her payroll. Imagine the cost of that building up. But she's given you the same sales as John, who contacts you twice a year. Now, can you imagine if you put the sales for John and the costs side by side, you'll have a profit. You put the same sale for Mary, but the cost is going to be like, boom, up here. Guaranteed Mary's losing, you're probably losing a lot of money on Mary because her payroll people have to answer queries for her, the tax people have to answer queries for her, the partner, the owner, do. You can see. So that was the one thing struck me this morning when I was just looking at those slides is that 80-20. You're not just looking at customers by sale, you're looking at by cost. And is that if it's a real big positive, it's a whale. If it's a big negative or a negative, it's a sardine.
Yeah, I don't know if you see it from over there, but over here we're seeing an influx of private equity companies buying companies, and then they come in with their formula and they do a 5-year plan. They grow that business, and they're also attracting a lot of equity people that want to put money behind, because they teach the whales and the sardines to a business. When they get it, they start seeing their profits skyrocket, and then they go ahead and sell it in 5 years or whatever their plan is to exit. But they bring in a person like you. And we talked earlier about, I've been involved with KKR 2 times with 2 acquisitions. They called it dogs with fleas, but they didn't really identify the top end. So I just was kind of like, okay, get rid of my dog with the fleas. But if at that moment I would have had your analogy of the whale, I think I would have grasped the concept sooner. But they said ABC, they ranked their customers ABC, which is okay. But I think for our viewers, we all know whales, they're big. Yeah. We all know sardines, they're small and stinky. Give us a little bit more of your experience and your journey of really how people are taking the concept and running with it.
Sure. I have a few slides, Pete. Will I run through those?
Yes.
And I have two case studies here that I think your viewers and listeners. So this is going on. Is this going out on video on podcast?
Yes, it is. It is.
A bit of both. Yeah, perfect. So one moment, I'll just come back here to the start. So I have 2 case studies here, Pete. I'll take you through that I think your viewers and listeners may like.
Awesome.
This is an accountant I worked with, and I'll show you some numbers in a moment around the number of customers they had and the number of the sales for the whales and sardines. But this is what the end result looks like. And again, I think this is very important to emphasize this, Pete, because when I talk to people about 80-20, sometimes I talk about whales and sardines, but I know, let's say, if I'm talking to them, let's say a month later or 2 months later, they say whales to me, and I say, well, what's your definition of a whale client? And they'll say, oh, it's our biggest sales. So I have to kind of remind them, no, it's not your biggest sales, it's your biggest profits. And this is a huge distinction. I mean, this is the nub of it. Most business owners would think, without not thinking in 80-20 terms, they might call their biggest clients by sales whales, but they haven't done the analysis. So a very important distinction. This is all about profitability. Whales are your most profitable customers. Quite often they're also your biggest by sales, but not always. Sometimes your biggest customers by sales are being completely overserviced, because everybody jumps. When somebody says, when they ring, everybody jumps, oh, look after this client, they're really important. So there's tons of resources and costs being poured into them, and they end up losing your money. So huge distinction. So the accountant, if you see the graph here, Pete, the greens are the whales, and this is just representative because they had 650 clients, so obviously I don't do a graph with 650. The whales are the very profitable customers. The ones in the middle are smallish profits, nice, and all the reds are losing money. So, and I have some numbers here I'll show you. And I know you mentioned the ABCD, right? I mentioned ABC, and I agree with you. The whales and sardines is so much better. But with accountants, sometimes we will do this classification. So if you look, and I'll appreciate there's a lot of numbers on the sheet here, but the main message here, if you look at the total number of clients, 653. Now the A's are their biggest clients by sales. This is sales. So this will give you an idea of how the 80-20 happens in a way. 61 customers, that's 9% of the customers, were giving them just over half their fees or their sales annually, yeah?
Whoa.
9%. Now look at the other end, look at the D's. 42% of the customers were giving them only 6%.
Oh my golly.
But you think about this. every single one of those customers still needs a minimum amount of service from the accountant. It's not like you can take on a client and say, well, they're small now, we won't put too much time into them. They all have to be set up in the system. And I'll give you an example. A lot of these smaller clients are actually
fascinating.
What they call rental clients. So people who have a second house and rent it out. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them are that. And people, so this accountant might say, well, I'll charge them 300 or 400 a year, a small euros, dollars, whatever, right? They're obviously in Ireland, so it's euros, but I'm sure your listeners will know it's the same. It could be dollars. Okay.
Yeah.
So they'll say, well, it's only a rental property. I'll charge them 300 euros. Sure. There's not much work involved, is there? Like, I know these rental properties. I've done them for family members and so on. Okay. So like somebody who owns a house, well, they can claim any expense that goes into that house for the previous year. They can claim it as a tax deduction. Yeah. So let's say somebody gets their house painted. Somebody's, there's often small little, they fix the door handle, like these maintenance things, they can kind of add up. So you imagine somebody who's a rental property might have, let's say 30 bills. They might have 30 bills, small and big, over the year, maintenance, grass cutting, all this stuff that goes on.
Yep.
Now, so you think about it. Now, this client has to be set up. Now, the accountant who's doing their tax return is going to have to get those 30, copies of the receipts or whatever. They're going to have to get them in. Now, imagine, people aren't always good at getting information, aren't. So if somebody's a bit slow getting information in, this accountant who's doing the tax return in the office is chasing the client, I've got 25 of your receipts, where's the other 5? And the client is, I must go off and get them. You've all this toing and froing going on just to get the information to do the tax return. And this can take time. It's fine to say, if they send them all in one go and you could do it and it was smooth, yes, you might make a profit. But, life doesn't work like that, okay? Always, as you know. Mm-hmm. So they're chasing this client. They now get all their bills in. Then they go work it out. The next thing, the client might email in, I forgot some, they haven't, I forgot these bills and whatever. So the thing goes on. You have to go back and open up the file and change it and so on. So the accountant in the office deals with it. Every single tax return goes in front of the tax manager. So the tax manager, she's putting time into it. She's reviewing it. Then it goes on to the director or owner of the business because he wants to see everything that goes through the office. Then they have to file it and submit it. Then they have to get on to the client to pay the money and so on. If they don't pay it, then the tax man is onto the accountant, the accountant's onto the client. So you can see all these steps, right? And I've often gone into a client, we're doing 80-20, I'll ask them to write out all the steps. And there can be 25, 30, 35 steps involved with the small client. But that doesn't count all the toing and froing, So you can see very quickly how the costs pile up on these smaller clients. So these 42, imagine having these 274 and getting 85,000. And I can assure you it costs a lot more than 85,000 to look after 274 clients. And that's what we found.
Yeah, I love that. This is fascinating to think that those D's are 6% of your profit.
And sales. This is sales. This is just the sales.
Sales. Okay. So the sales, like the percentages here, are really reflecting that focus of the business owner. And I heard a person say years ago, as just the way we make decisions. Let's at the beginning of the day, we get 300 units of energy. How we spend that energy determines how that end of that day is going to be. So if you're spending those units on those D's, you're going to be absolutely wiped out. You're not going to have anything left. So, but if you spend that energy on the A's, you're going to be energized. But I think it's human nature to think I tackle the tasks equally. I don't prioritize every decision. And I think if you prioritize decisions, you make better decisions. And if you make better decisions, you feed the super whales.
Yeah. So I suppose, and, I'm conscious of people watching this and listening. So the message, I think, one of the messages for your listeners and viewers, Pete, is this applies to every single business that I've ever looked at. So if you're a business owner and you're looking at this, I can assure you that you have a large percentage of your smaller clients are giving you a very small percentage of your sales. Right. And the cost it takes to look after them, I can assure you, are a lot higher than the sales that come in. And that is why, on average, when I look at businesses, 30%, 3 out of 10 customers are losing money. And this is kind of why. And I'll just go back for a moment to and we know 80-20 is about the profitability, but I suppose the reason I'm showing you the sales is because it's to try and, I suppose, explain how this is back to the profitability. Why you have all these reds is because of, well, one of the reasons is because of this, yeah? Because you have so much time and resources going after looking after these smaller clients.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely, I would like to rewind my career and understand this early on and be able to apply the principles, because even like we were talking, even when KKR explained their philosophy, how they're going to take the company and grow it, they didn't give me the mental picture to understand really the whale analogy. So I was thinking, get rid of the dog with fleas, but I didn't understand how important it is to feed. I mean, we have resources every day. We make decisions every day. And if I'm feeding those whales, how that would affect the makeup of my customer base.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, there's a very, this accountant, no, I'll just call him John, okay? I call everyone John or Mary, okay? just to hide it, I wouldn't be mentioning the client name. There was what came out of this analysis, though, was to me, was fascinating, okay? Because the actions we took, and it took about 6 months for us to start changing this mix. Now, what accountants can do, certainly in Ireland, and it may be the same in the US and elsewhere, is that, so John looked at his Ds, right? 274. Now, it was a brave decision. He decided to get rid of most of them, okay? And now he went through them. He kept some of them. He kept about 15, I think. And some of them were like for, we'll say, sentimental reasons. Like some of his older clients were in there. And actually, his father had the accountancy business before John. So some of them went all the way back to his father. So like he kept some for sentimental reasons, and that's fine. That's absolutely perfect. He only kept 15. So he sold almost all his D clients. Now, the way it works, I think he got maybe about 80,000. What they'll do is if somebody's accountant is buying those clients, what they'll do is they'll give you 1 year's fees. So he got about 80,000. Now, it may seem a bit mad, somebody buying these sardines, but I think that accountant actually had a very automated system. So they knew these were like, these are rental properties, but they were confident that they could take them on and automate the process more. Yeah. So it probably meant let's say the client going on and uploading all their receipts onto like a drive, Google Drive, or these type of drives as a thing from the accountant chasing them, this kind of. So anyway, so now John he made the decision, and then 2 weeks later he got cold feet. He was phoning me saying, "Oh God, it's still 80,000 in fees." But I have to say I admire him, because after me chatting to him, he stuck with his decision. He got rid of, I think it was like, we'll say 260 clients. Okay. Now he's down 80,000 in fees. Now at the same time, what I was doing with some of his whales is I was looking at their accounts, and I could see some of them doing 2-3 million a year in business. And, I don't know if you've ever looked at a set of accounts for 2 years. An awful lot can happen and change in 2 years. And sometimes it's not always positive. So, for example, one of his clients had a maintenance business, and the previous year, the sales grew 2%, but their costs grew 14%. So they were down about 250,000 in profit because they just took their eye off the ball. Now, that to me is a great a great prospect for the accountant, John, to go to his clients and say, look, unfortunately, your profit is down 250,000. What I'd recommend is that you get monthly management accounts. Yeah. And I will sit down with you monthly, and let's go through this, and let's plug this hole in your business. And there were two guys, early 60s, who were probably thinking about maybe getting out in a few years' time. So it made sense for them. So what John did is he landed with his whales. He landed 3 clients doing monthly management accounts and charged them 24 grand and 30 grand a year for this. So
Wow.
he's down 80 from 260 clients. Now, believe it or not, John was able to get that 80,000 back by doing extra work for 3 of his clients. Just 3.
Wow.
Isn't that just
It's fascinating. And because I know I've heard what Jeff has told me a lot of different examples. And
yeah,
you feel that in your position, you almost have to be a counselor, psychologist, because emotionally you're making a shift in their thinking. And it's not like they see it like this and they immediately grasp it and run with it. How are you like having to walk people off the back the plank? I got to stay with these people. I've had them for 30 years. What do you do to kind of move them to a different type of thinking?
Yeah, it's a great question, Pete. I mean, I suppose what I do is I try and find out what their camper van is, right? What I mean by that is, we call them camper vans. You call them SUV and not SVs or something.
But I know the analogy. Yeah,
Winnebagos, not Winnebago.
Yes.
Yeah. So you have these vans you can drive around in and sleep in and so on. So one of my clients, when they got onto the discussion, because certainly anybody in their 50s, I'm going to have the discussion with them about, what's going to happen when you want to step away from the business. So this guy wanted to buy a camper van and travel the world, and he wanted to travel the world, but also he had one of his daughters was living in Australia. So he was going to travel across Europe and Asia and end up going over to Australia. Now he needed to get his business, his profitability to a certain level to fund his pension fund, and off he go. So that was his camper van. So his why, his motivation was to grow his business to get the camper van. So I always I tell the story to clients, and then I say to them, what's the equivalent of your camper van?
Oh, I love that.
And so, look, I mean, mine, Pete, you like this. Mine is, I'm going to, in the years ahead, I'm going to be spending more and more time in Portugal, lovely sunny Portugal, playing golf. Much as I love Ireland, I don't love Irish winters, okay? Because it starts raining. It starts raining in October, and it might decide to finish in April, right? No, we're not quite that bad, but Ireland is pretty wet.
Yeah, I know. Everybody that goes over there to play golf, they say, I love it. Now, I didn't like freezing, rain going sideways, and all that, but I know what you're saying.
Yeah, so my camper van is Portugal, playing golf and still working. I love what I do. I want to keep the brain active, but choose my own hours. Yes. That's my camper van. So back to your question, how do I get people to embrace this and make changes? Well, I want to find out what their camper van is. I want to find out what their why and their motivation is to change. With this guy, actually, this accountant, he'd taken over the business from his father. Yeah, he obviously, it was important for him for that to be successful and be successful and keep the business going and so on. But also, I think he wanted to maybe do something a bit different himself. He wanted to do a bit more consulting. He wanted to work a bit closer with 1 or 2 clients. Okay, he wanted to have the freedom, I suppose, to maybe do different kind of work. But for him to be able to do that, he needed to improve the profitability of the business and hire a manager, hire somebody to run the office, and that would free him up to go do more value-added work with certain clients and so on. I have to give him credit. He made the decision to sell those 260 clients to move the sardines on, and that's kind of a brave decision. Not everybody will do that. The most common thing is they put up their prices, Right. So, but that's very interesting. So I have another case study. If I move on to that, is that okay, Pete?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So
I
that's the
love it.
classification. That's the same thing in graph format. So imagine 9% of your clients, 9% of clients are giving you this. And what was it, 40? I go back to my percentage, 42. 9% are giving you this big chunk here, and 42 are giving you this little piece. I mean, it's mad, isn't it? Mad.
You
Okay.
know,
And
it's so. Did you
yeah,
feel like I have never talked to, because Jeff's colorblind, so when I like colors and pictures and stuff, he doesn't geek out like I do.
yeah,
When I saw you first on LinkedIn, my jaw dropped because you're an image color, storyteller.
yeah.
Did you like grow up? How did you develop that skill set that you simplify and you colorify things that I mean my brain gets it right away.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think my dad was a great storyteller. He loved telling stories. He loved my parents just when I was growing up, they had like a bed and breakfast,
Mm-hmm.
So like, and the main tourists coming to Ireland then were, because I'm near the Blarney Castle, a lot of American tourists, so they'd be coming from all over the US. So, and my dad would sit down and spend hours with them, talking about his family and talking about, people wanting to trace their roots, and he helped them tracing their roots. And he was into
Mm-hmm.
history, and he was a great character, and he loved telling stories. So I think the Irish are known for good for telling stories. We're good storytellers.
Well, I
Um,
think good storytellers with color. I mean,
yeah,
I
yeah, with
love
color.
it.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, because
yeah,
the brain works in images, pictures. At least
yeah.
mine does, and a lot of people do. So when I see your post on LinkedIn, when I listen to you explain concepts, I get it right away.
Okay, thanks. That's great to hear. I appreciate the feedback, Pete. Thank you.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm gonna go on to a bit more color here now in a moment. And just to finish off on the look, this is obviously one of the main messages we were talking about
Yeah.
earlier on. And for your listeners and viewers, I would, I can't emphasize too much. I would really hope that they will take this message on board, that all your clients are not the same. Some are much more valuable than others.
Yep.
So if you're a business owner, you're listening to this, I can't encourage it enough that you take a bit of time and go in and just crunch your numbers, compare your sales to your costs, and see what your profit or loss is by customer. Identify those whales, and then you want to. I love Richard Koch in his book, The 80-20 Principle.
Mhm.
He says that when you identify your whale clients, you should you should be like a SWAT team. The way a SWAT team rushes into a building, right? I love that. So he says, when your whale contacts you and looks for something, you should respond like a SWAT team. Okay, I love
Yes.
that.
Yeah, I do too. That
You want
makes
to
sense.
you want to rush into the building and see what they want. And this is another key part of, we spoke earlier on about people kind of sticking with the 80-20 and implementing it fully and not kind of half doing it.
Mhm.
I encourage people, when they've done your 80-20, I want them to come up with a one pager like this, and I want them to keep it on their wall. I want to keep it in their canteen. I want them to almost put it inside a toilet door. Okay. It's like, I want it everywhere. And they need to keep reminding themselves, who are my whales, profitable whales, and who are my sardines? Because what you want to do is, when you're marketing, you want to go after the whales. If it's in this case, you can see, look, when I'm saying for the account, or a printer up here, but it's actually, sorry, I forgot to change that, right? But this is an accountant, okay?
Mhm.
Business advisory. So value added advice like this, they can charge more. If they're advising people on how to reduce their tax bill, a project tax bill, pensions, they can charge more because that's high value work. And
Right.
some of their larger, when I say compliance, this is just doing their annual accounts. Some of them are very profitable, not all, but some. And then who are the sardines? The 274 we looked at, okay, that were giving them like 6% of their sales, 42% of the clients giving 6% of it. Most of them are losing money because there's a minimum cost to setting them. And then unfortunately, some of the larger complaints, so these are ones, they might have, annual fees of 15 or 20,000. If they're on the phone to you every week and you're pouring time into them and you don't charge for it, they may well be losing money. So have this list, keep it close at hand, and this is your Bible. This is your business Bible going forward. Don't ever forget this. because unfortunately sometimes people do. And what they'll do is, and even the accountant, this guy John, almost did it. Okay, he got rid of all these rental properties. And I was with him a couple of months later, and he was on about this like small tradesman, this small plumber or something. He was going to take him on, and I said, "What are you doing? Like, this guy was working by himself for 15 years. He wasn't growing to grow into a whale. I was kind of going, what are you doing? You've just got rid of 260 of them. Why would you take on?" So there's a bit of reminding.
Right.
So Pete, I'll show you the second case study here. I know I'm just jumping around a little bit. Okay, this is an IT business. So what they would do is they look after your printer, they look after your, all your antivirus and malware and so on, do all the software and so on. We did an 80-20 analysis, and I absolutely love this. Is one of my favorites actually, because it's just absolutely a bit mad. So there's these 4 clients had the same level of sale. All the sales was between 50 and 60,000 per year. Okay. Now, the biggest client, so let's say their sales are around 60 grand.
Right.
They gave them a profit of 17,500. Okay. Happy days. Like, you would think that your biggest client should be your biggest whale. Yeah. Like,
right.
Let's take it. So we're happy with step 1. But now let's look at the second client. I think, let's say their sales around 57,000. It was around that, I think. Okay. Lost 15,000. You wouldn't expect that, would you?
No, not at all. Because
Okay,
we're
I'll explain
geared
why in a
towards
moment.
sales. We think,
Yeah.
oh, they do this. But
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So the third client, sales of, I think, about 54,000. Nice profit of 4, which you'd expect. Okay. The fourth biggest, lost about 13,000. So, like, you 4 clients who have a similar level of sales. 2 of them are your most profitable, and 2 of them are your biggest sardines. And you're kind of going, how is this possible, right? How does this happen? And the good thing, these guys, it was two guys in the business. Okay, they had about 12 staff working for them. But the good thing about them is they had all the data to work it out, and then to start getting answers, because they had timesheets. So, let's just say a customer's phoning in saying, my printer isn't working, my Wi-Fi is acting up, or whatever. They'd raise a ticket and then go help them. Yeah. That kind of IT business. Mm-hmm. So what happened is, how come client A was paying for a certain level of service? I'm just going to say they had 10 hours of support a week. Let's just say 10 hours of support a week. They on average were using 7 or 8 because they had all the information. So that's fine. Now let's just say client B was paying for 9 hours of service per week. Yeah. Mm-hmm. They were the ones who were on the phone like twice a day with all these queries. So they were paying for, I'll say, a bronze level of service, and they were getting gold. They're 9 hours a week. There were some weeks there were like 24 hours, 26 hours, right? So they were getting a much higher level of service than they were paying for.
Yeah.
Client C was a bit like client A. They were paying for a certain level of service per week, so many support tickets and so on, and they were under that. Okay. So they were, we call them a low maintenance client. Yes. And then client D was a bit like B. They were paying for, let's say, 8 hours. Let's say they were paying for 8 hours of support per week, and they were getting 15 or 17 or whatever. So they were getting a much higher level. Now, I suppose this kind of had a happy ending. Again, thankfully, this one had a happy ending because the owners had the information to go to B and C. So B and D, the Reds, yeah? They had the information to go to them. And quite simply, they were saying, showing them the contract, you're paying for example, client B, you're paying for 10 hours of support per week. Over the last 12 months, on average, you've got, let's say, 18 or 19 or 20, whatever it was, they got a much higher level of support. So if you want to maintain this level of support that you're getting, your monthly payment will have to go from A up to B. And they went for it. And in fact, D went for it as well. So both of those, the B and D, they were able to turn them from sardines into whales because they had the information which allowed them to go have the conversation. And actually, I think there were solicitors. They had solicitors, a lot of solicitors and accountants. So you can imagine how important data protection is to a lawyer, a solicitor, or a lawyer. They need the best coverage. They need the best protection, don't they? They need to make sure their IT systems are secure. So if they were paying for, say, 10 and getting 20 or 22, they needed 20 or 22. So they were happy to pay for that higher level of service. So it had a kind of happy ending. And that IT company, actually, their profits have just gone on to a completely other level. And I suppose they had the data, but they weren't going back to their customers regularly enough. So they now have a loop in there. They're reviewing this at least every 2 or 3 months. I think they go back and they're comparing the hours people are paying for to what they're getting, and they're correcting it much sooner.
Yeah, I like that analogy you just covered. Jeff says path to cash. So it's almost like you educate your sardines. If you want to have the relationship that works for both of us, here's your path. If we're going to bill you for 9 hours and you're going to take 19, that's not going to work. Yeah. And so they can either go to the 19 hours, which they've been getting for 12 months, or you have to give them to somebody that would want them. I mean, because you're destroying your business if you have too much red in there. Yeah.
And they had quite a few reds. These are the biggest. Obviously, this is the biggest 4. That's why I looked at them. But they had lots of other reds. I think that they had, I think there's something like 50 active large customers. I think about 17 of them were red. So these were the biggest 2. So imagine if you went out with this graph, you'd have another probably 15 reds. Now, the thing about it is, not all of those reds, some of those reds, when they went and had the conversation, let's just say it was a cafe or something, okay, where the data wasn't as important as a solicitor. Some of those didn't want to pay for the higher level of service, so they did actually move them on. But I suppose the important thing for them is that their biggest reds were happy to pay for that higher level of service, because the nature of their business was they needed it. Yeah, they couldn't.
And you're giving your customers a choice.
Yes,
it's called pay to play. If we want to have a good working relationship, we always go back to that win-win. Right now, it's you win, we lose. So that can't continue, or you're going to be out of business. I want to wind it down because our viewers want more of what you are talking about. Tell our viewers, like, if they're over here, how can they do business with you? Like, how can they contact you? Because obviously we're a global economy now.
Yeah, of course.
You don't have to be sitting in Kennesaw, Georgia, to be able to help service and support our business people that want to grow through this concept of 80-20 or sardines versus whales.
I appreciate a lot of it. Yeah, a lot can be done by Zoom. I even have clients in Ireland, if they're 3-4 hour drive away. I normally, I might meet them once, but just some clients I haven't met. Even though if you're in Florida, Pete, are you? I mean,
I'm in Atlanta, so
but if it's warm,
it doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah,
your concept, I will tell our viewers, I've geeked out on 80-20 for years.
Yeah.
I have never heard anybody simplify it and put the color pictures for my brain to grasp it as quick as you do. And I think for business owners, we like things simple.
Yeah.
And I think our viewers can appreciate the way you approach things, the way you educate them, the way you lay out the plan. So please share how they can get a hold of you and do business with you.
And just to say, I do really appreciate the feedback. It's lovely to hear you say that, and I do very much appreciate it. So thank you, for your kind words.
Well, you're so close to it. It's like you don't see the difference. I see it from what we talked about, the different set of glasses.
Yeah.
I'm a picture guy. Yes. I'm a color guy. Jeff, when I talk with him, he's always explaining these examples, but he's a black and white guy and he's not color. So we always kid about the fact that I have to have pictures and colors, and his brain doesn't think like that. So go ahead.
No, that's very interesting.
I had to throw that in.
So I mean, look, my email address is neil@quantum.ie. I don't know if anyone wants to contact me, they can. I'm on LinkedIn, Neil O'Brien. Look, I'm happy to chat to anybody. So I love if any of your listeners, if yours wants to chat about 80/20, I'd have a discovery call, whatever, a call with anybody, just have a chat, because I love the topic so much, and I do anyway. I always have the first call. Obviously, there's no charge or anything, so I'm happy to chat with anyone. And I suppose, just again, that message for your viewers and listeners, Pete, I think, even, go back to the example of the IT, I suppose what I'd encourage people to do is, business owners, we often just look at our customers by sales. So like, go back to that, the second, the B client there, the red one. What I encourage people to do is have a look at the sales by client. Now also have a look at the costs per client, okay? So like the example there of them paying for 10 hours, and let's say getting 20 or 22 hours per week, okay? Mm-hmm. So being completely over-serviced, costing you more than your sales, yeah? I suppose that's kind of a key message I'd like people to take away is, whatever way you do it, have a look at your customers, clients by sales. Now, next to it, have a look at the costs and see, is that lower? As if you graph it, is it higher? Where is it? Is it the same? Because that's the nub of 80/20 that's how you spot your whales and sardines, and then start making the changes to grow the profits substantially.
Mm-hmm. I tell you what I'll do for our viewers is I follow you on LinkedIn, and I'm educated all the time. So if you're not ready to pull the trigger and do a discovery call, follow Neil on LinkedIn and kind of get an understanding of his philosophy and how he adds value to companies, because it's very clear once you and we're in a busy kind of world, everybody's like running, and if you don't think strategically, I think you're missing so much out there. And I think what you're explaining to our viewers is thinking strategically about how you grow your business, not just going for the one factors. Hey, I got this sales from this client, this sale. There's definitely HI in everything. Don't get so caught up in AI, but always HI, and then follow you. And I'd love for you to come back, because I could geek out on this stuff all day.
I know, I love it too.
Yeah,
I love it too. Absolutely.
Yeah. I would love for you to come back, and we'll dive deeper into a simple way for our business owners to really make this year their best year by understanding this principle and applying it to their business.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know if it's part of the format. If any of your listeners, if yours have questions, if that would work for you, Pete, it'd be great.
Yes.
Somebody sent in a question.
Put it on the YouTube channel, put it on your LinkedIn page. Give us your feedback, because we all grow by feedback. We learn, you learn. And so, if you have a question and you just been burning, like, I got to ask, then reach out and ask that question. And even if we can't answer it fully on that platform, we'll answer it in a future podcast. That enables you to dig deeper into some things that we think would help you out there, add value to your company.
Yeah. Sounds good.
So tell our viewers as we close, what one thing would you want them to walk away from this podcast?
Probably just the last thing I said there, Pete, about, when I was showing the IT company and their, the sardine was because somebody was paying for, let's call it 10 hours a week, and they were getting 20, 22. It's just to find a way to compare look at your customers' sales and look at the costs as well, and see who are the whales, who are the sardines. And once you know who the whales are, you just want to look after them, make sure they don't walk, like, unfortunately, the electronics company, make sure they're happy. What else can you do for them? Grow your sales with the existing whales, and then focus your marketing on new whales, whatever that is for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Neil. We appreciate
Thank you, Pete.
being with us now. I know it's the end of your day. It's the beginning of ours. So
Oh, yeah,
have
yeah.
a wonderful
Very
rest
good.
of your day.
Thank you very much, Pete.
You're welcome.